All right, so welcome everybody to the official fall section on emergency medicine session on educational leadership and administration. I'm going to give a couple brief announcements from the Education Steering Committee, and then we'll move into the initial part of our talk. So again, I'm Brad Sobolewski, one of the emergency medicine faculty from Cincinnati Children. You may remember me from such presentations as PEMPICS. I am not in costume today. But on a news level, Manisha Agarwal from Atlanta is our new PEMPICS chair. And so she is going to take it in wonderful and brilliant new directions, including an Instagram account with lots of cool pictures. So more news on that to come. We also have a new ultrasound chair for the section. Stephanie Cohen, who is also from Emory in Atlanta, was delighted to join a leadership role within this section on emergency medicine. PAS abstracts are due January 4th, and so likely that you got an email, so we encourage you to submit those. And then you may have seen an email coming out from Sue Telez as well as from the section. The mentoring subcommittee working group is having a master class in publishing educational research, which I got to attend because I got to keep publishing things. That's on December 9th. We'll send out some of the details after this meeting, but you've got Becca Hart, Kara Dowdy, Pavan Zaveri, Karen Mangold, and Michael Goldman, who are all going to share their expertise in getting educational research published. And I think that there is an incredible amount that we can learn from them. And if you have fellows that have yet to join the section on emergency medicine, tell them, what are they waiting for? We would be more than happy and delighted to have them join. And we're looking for opportunities to get, especially our fellows and some of our junior faculty, opportunities to share their education research over the coming year. So a lot more on that in the near future. But let's move on to part one of our session this afternoon, and we have a panel of the wise and experienced. I'm briefly going to introduce our three panelists, which you see pinned up here on the screen. Each of them are going to deliver a brief soliloquy, but it's not going to be in like dramatic iambic pentameter. Nobody's going to hold a skull and talk, I hope. That would be kind of
Speak for
weird.
yourself.
You have that planned? Because that would be really dramatic. Your days of pediatric emergency medicine and RSV are laden with learning and leadership. So we have Liz Jacobs, who is the Fellowship Director, Pediatric Emergency Medicine Associate Professor at Brown. We have Celine Sagalowski, who's the Vice Chair for Education, Scholarship, and Academic Development. She's a Director of the Fellowship Program at NYU. And then down in my lower right-hand corner, Devesh Agarwal. He's a professor of pediatrics at George Washington. He's brand new to the field, just learning his way, and is the vice chair for medical education and the DIO at Children's National. So, I think the cumulative experience of our three panelists, I think I'm spoiled that they all said yes to join us today. And I think, Liz, we have you going first with your brief intro before we get into a panel of very challenging questions that I'm going to ask you as your official radio host today.
Awesome. And Brad, do you want me to share my slides, or what do you want to, how do we want to do it?
Let's see.
Just do it that way?
Yeah, so it should be set up that. All right, I made you a co-host.
All right, sweet. Hey everyone, I am Liz Jacobs. I am at Brown University / Hasbro Children's Hospital. I'm thrilled to be talking about anything beside RSV, flu, and COVID. And I am also the PEM Fellowship Director here, have been that for about a decade or so. Before that was at DC Children's with Devesh and was Fellowship Director there. And I am the newly minted, as of about 3 weeks ago, chair of the AAP PEM Fellowship Directors Committee. So perhaps the Queen. So Brad asked me to talk about how did I get here, and I'm still struggling with that. So suddenly I realize I'm middle-aged and I need computer glasses and things like that, but kind of took this moment to sort of look back a little bit at my career, hope to share some tips and pearls with everyone today. So I graduated from fellowship and was told, guess what? You get to be program director. So I had been out for about 2 weeks. but knew that I loved a challenge. I loved fellowship and all things fellowship, having just been a fellow myself, and looked at it as really a mystery meant to be solved from there. I knew how to do the little things like tell people how they could fix their cold feet. But I really didn't know sort of the big things. What is a curriculum? What is training? What are these things called milestones? Sort of all things that were mysteries, and realized I needed to get some training to become a teacher. So it's not a children's title, but I loved it. So I was offered a position in DC Children's called the Master Teacher Program. It was a certificate in human resource development, and probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because I met tons and tons of fun and interesting people like Devesh, and got to spend time learning about education, learning about leadership, learning about how to manage people, just skills that I take it with my day. And also learned a little bit about where I wanted my path to go. And I think as we sort of talk, and I'm interested to hear what Devesh and Celine and all the amazing people on this call talk about, is sort of when to say yes. And I think that saying yes to some things, even if you don't really know why you're saying yes, besides being a good egg, is really important, because by being on these committees, by being part of certain groups, really gets to move your own leadership skills forward. And you get to campaign for things that are really important for you. So for equity, for leadership, for work-life balance, whatever your missions are, these are the ways to have these things be super important to you. And by being on these committees, you eventually become the chair of them if you stick around long enough. And now I get to lead other people and mentor the next generation, which is the most exciting thing for me. So I hope that we talk about today about time and time management and how to advocate for your own time. I also would love to hear from my group, because I'm still struggling this as well, is how to speak up for yourself, how to advocate for yourself, because I think within educational leadership, it's sort of a little bit more murky. It's not like I've gotten that R01 grant and so I have 30% protected time and I need this, but how to say that you are really important, that what you are doing is important for other physicians and for their career. And also to continue to find joy in education, because I think that our jobs are hard, but teaching and mentoring the next generation of physicians is one of these bucket filling activities. And of all these books, this is actually the only one I have read. And it's an amazing, amazing book. And I thank everyone so much for listening to me for a couple minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. We are going
No
to,
problem.
old school MC style, pass the mic to Celine.
What she said, I'll be getting to know. Thank you, Brad, and everybody so much for allowing me to be part of this panel. You know, there are so many cognitive biases out there, and self-serving bias or survivorship bias, you know, kind of holds that we erroneously assign good outcomes to our own hard work or skills, but bad outcomes are ascribed to luck. And I sort of have had the opposite lens sitting through career panels, not this one so far, but I remember being at the Penn Fellows Conference, you know, over a decade ago, and feeling that so many of these suffered from kind of a modesty bias or a career retroscope serendipity bias, where faculty tended to view kind of the trajectory of their careers through this, you know, lens of just fortuitous circumstances, chance encounters and friendships, which of course play a big role. But as somebody who's like a type A planner and, you know, believes in sort of having a vision, it always felt frustrating because I wanted to know, how do I have this career? And then also the serendipity narrative, you know, again, this has changed over time, but to me always felt just a little gendered or privileged, because that's sort of like, you know, oh, I had beers with my buddies at this conference and we launched this collaborative. very much, felt that historically women and minoritized populations didn't really have the privilege to rely on serendipity and in-group relationships as much for career advancement. How many just in this room of gray and white names, how many women have missed, I don't know, socials or conferences or networking events because of family obligations, whereas the men go. And so I was originally going to do my spiel twice through 2 different lenses, but in the interest of time, I'm only going to do the totally self-serving lens. No, but really I was going to, sort of talk about the career using a little bit of a survivorship or self-serving bias with the hopes of really highlighting sort of 3 themes that I think Liz actually touched on. One is, this acknowledgement of like 99% perspiration and sort of the work that really goes into some of these career decisions. 2 is really the role of mentors and sponsors. And 3, sort of along with the work piece, is just some difficult choices that you have to make kind of along the way in saying yes to things. And so I think like so many people in this room, and there are so many familiar faces, my interest in medical education started very early on. Like many of you, I, TA'd and was class rep to the curricular committee and did peer tutoring. And it was too early in training at that point to really have the foresight to know that what I wanted to do was med ed, but I did pursue sort of that passion in getting an MPH at the time and the measure and evaluation of health education programs. And having that quantitative and qualitative skill set was really useful for subsequent training. And so during residency, I was able to apply, some of those efforts to scholarly work, and then was asked to do a chief year, and that sort of served as a mini med ed, or applied and got a chief year, and that served as a mini med ed fellowship. In some ways, I was allowed to sort of get my certification as a sim instructor during that time, launch some curricular developments that were in sim, and a couple of co-residents and peers on studies that included, trainee and resident burnout, that launched a bit of sort of a scholarly background at that point, I guess. And deciding to do that chief year was actually a really hard decision. There are some folks, Katie and Josh, who knew me at the time because, I had just gotten married, and we were actually, I got married and we were expecting our first child, and my husband actually had taken a job in New York as I said yes to the chief year. And so we spent my first year while I was expecting, we'd spent many years long distance prior to that, but we spent the year that I was expecting apart, which meant, puking on the Amtrak train, Northeast Corridor. But it turned out that that was actually one of the most formative years of my training and career, and still a year that I look back on so fondly that really paved the way for my career. And then when I was applying to fellowships, Liz, you talked about self-advocacy in some ways. I don't know if Cindy's on the line, but I knew I had to be in New York. And so even way before application started, I set up a meeting with Cindy, who was, also program director at that time, and kind of said, like, I want to be here, I want to do med ed, and tried to sell myself, even before applications opened. And part of what drew me to that fellowship program in particular was the female leadership. Cindy was the program director, Mary Simon at the time was the division chief, and I was able to use that scholarly time to pursue focused studies, under the mentorship of not just the program leadership, but Martin Puzik was there at the time and was a big scholarly mentor of mine. And got additional training through the Center for Educational Research and Evaluation on qualitative methods, with Dave on some sim efforts. And I think similar to Liz, as I was finishing up training, I was asked to take on a role in education, specifically doing UME education. And actually it worked out in a way that I was asked to take on that role, and I started even before my fellowship had technically even finished, because there were other pregnancy leaves in the meantime too. So that was a difficult decision, taking on I think similar to Liz, a responsibility as a new attending in that psychological transition, having an infant and a toddler at home, taking on an educator role. But it was really made possible, by mentorship and sponsorship. And so the woman who was, and still is vice chair for education at the time there, Marina Catalozzi, did a couple of things I think all of my mentors have done for me, which is really put, the learner forward as the face of certain initiatives. Say, speak at this national conference, but I'm going to have Celine speak, or I can't really be first author on this paper, but I have somebody that I'm going to recommend to be first author on this collaborative piece, sort of, like setting up the doubles point so that you can overhead smash it, as part of the team. And And I think those, and then just giving me creative space, I think was huge as a self-starter and someone who likes to work independently, just having, you know, a little bit of leeway and autonomy to pursue my passions. But the biggest thing, honestly, was that she negotiated time for me. I was not, you know, as junior faculty, I was not in a place to say, I need X hours. And each year, you know, she had the, you know, sort of political standing and the knowledge to actually negotiate for my time for education. And I think that's actually the biggest thing that, you know, helped support some of that work. And then a couple of years after that, when Mike Mojica was stepping down as PD here at NYU, I was hesitant because I loved what I was doing, but I was excited for the opportunity to, you know, run my own program and really use that as a way to negotiate the things that mattered to me, which really is TI. And really did, that was like the bulk of my negotiation was, you know, protected time. And it was a bit of a leap of faith to switch institutions, but I really was guided by something Martin Pusick said, which is NYU is an institution that takes med ed seriously, and it was, and still is, a department that invests a lot in educational leadership and resources. Not that Columbia didn't, Columbia also very much did, but it was an opportunity that presented itself at a time that really spoke to me. And, you know, when I took on that role, basically I said, I want to be Devesh when I grow up. I said, I first see myself, you know, doing a PD role for, you know, 5 to 10 years, but I'd really like a larger educational role in sort of my 5 to 10 year plan ultimately. And, you know, before my 7-year media roadmap was executed, I was asked to take on the role of VCE because there had been, you know, significant changes in the department during the COVID years and other vicissitudes that, you know, did make this opportunity possible earlier than I had foresaw. And that also was a hard decision because it didn't fit my plan. And if you've heard one thing, it's that I like to plan. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I had wanted some time to really be a PD, to grow and get to know the community of PEM PDs, to focus a little on my family and on my own scholarship, to be honest, because I do think, and maybe Devesh, you can speak a little bit to this too, but administrative roles, you know, take on a lot of time that doesn't often leave time for scholarship and scholarly pursuits. And also, to be perfectly honest, for the first time in my life, I felt imposter syndrome. And I, you know, really the first time in my life, no. And I worried if I could do the role. It was a bigger role at an earlier time than I had anticipated. But I will say that it has been extremely educational, also challenging. And, you know, this is now 8-9 months in, so you'll have to have another panel in like 2 years and ask me if it was a good choice or not. But I do think that, you know, the 3 themes that emerged to me when I was thinking on this lens was that your choices build on each other. So even if you don't realize it at the time, the things that you say yes to end up layering into a common vision. And it does take a little bit of foresight. And I do think it's a little disingenuous to say that it's all, you know, serendipity and have that kind of hindsight bias looking at it. And you also become more efficient over time and with skills. So the more PowerPoints you do, the easier it is to do a really good one in, you know, an hour or 2 instead of 8 hours. And the more lectures you give, the easier it becomes. The more papers you write, the easier it becomes. And the second is, you know, to not shy away from sort of difficult challenges, but realize that the taller the mountain, kind of the bigger the, you know, altitude headache that comes with it. And to, you know, take some of that as part and parcel of growth as well, you know, personal growth. And then the other thing is just what's right for one is not right for everybody. And so just knowing where your lines in the sand are in terms of, you know, work-life balance and how many things you say yes to. And the corollary to that is what's right for you at one point in your life might not be right at another. So for some people, going part-time at a certain stage in one's life or career might be right. Taking on more responsibilities at another time might be right. Declining a leadership opportunity in one instance, but taking it head on in another. You know, the best thing about academic medicine is that these choices are neither finite nor linear. And I think, you know, just challenging yourself and saying yes, and then paying forward that mentorship and sponsorship to each generation and using your position to advocate for the things that you believe in, as Liz mentioned.
Wonderfully said. Thank you, Celine. Now I got to pass the mic to Wesh. You got to follow that up. You're batting cleanup here.
I don't know how to do that. I don't think you need me to speak after Liz and Celine spoke so well. I was going to talk about serendipity, but now I can't talk about serendipity after Celine.
Thunder stolen.
Now I have no soliloquy. I don't know what to do. So I will happy to share sort of my story. So first, I've been a Children's National. This is my 20th year now at Children's National. I think Liz and I started as faculty at the same time. You finished, we both finished fellowship at the same time. I came from Boston and you started here, but I will shape my responses, I guess, based on sort of, what's guiding me in medical education. I'll tell you what I've done here. For a long time, for 3 years, I ran the resident rotation in the emergency department. So I was the sort of the educational lead in our emergency department. The title that the person who's right here on my screen, Sam Zhao, has right now. And so I ran the resident rotation for 3 years. I poured my heart into it. I fixed a lot of things that were broken. And then, I got asked to take on the entire residency program. So I was a residency program director here at Children's National for 13 years, from 2007 to 2020. And I had the honor and privilege of training 500 pediatricians in those years. And that was great. In 2019, I took over as the vice chair for education for the entire institution, and the designated institutional official, the ACGME DIO, and then several hats that came with that, chair of the GME committee and things like that came with that in 2019. If you're doing your math and you're listening carefully, you'll realize from 2019 to 2020, I did both jobs, which was a painful year because that was the year that COVID hit. And I didn't get paid for both. I only got paid for one, or 0.75, I guess, of one. That was some protected time I got. But I've actually had a great time here at Children's National, and the frame of my comments is on this: is that I've always felt, and I still feel today, that the greatest rewards of our careers in academic medicine and the highest achievements are not the papers that we publish. Don't tell my boss that. But they're actually the people that we train, right? Because they represent the future of the field, right? So our job as educators is to train our trainees to the best possible way we can get them trained, right? To become the future leaders in pediatric healthcare, so especially pediatric emergency medicine, or as a pediatric residency program, I said pediatric anything. And so that has been my guiding mission, right? And so if I want to work on training people better, and that was my passion, right? I let that guide my efforts. So back when I was, the rotation director in the emergency department, the first job I ever got, I had to fight for that job, right? I had to tell my then division chief, when I was brand new out of fellowship, came from a different institution, why I deserve that job and why I deserve protected time. And so this is my first lesson I learned in negotiation, is that when you ask your division chief or when you ask your boss for protected time, you need to show them what the return on that investment is going to be. Why is it that they should give you that protected time? Why should they invest in you? Because you need to be held accountable, right, for that time. And so I gave then, many of you know Jim Chamberlain, our longtime division chief at the Children's National. I told him 3 things. Measure me on these 3 things in 1 year, and if I don't fulfill, you either take the time away or you take the job away. And I did. I fulfilled in all those 3 things. And in fact, I poured my heart into it. That was passion. So I'm going to frame this in passion, right? And so, my passion was trainee education back then, first year as a faculty member here at Children's National. While Liz was fixing the fellowship program, I was working with the residents and working to improve the residency training experience at Children's National, which was broken at the time. It was clearly broken, and we needed to fix it. And I will state that, I think serendipity had some role here for sure, because a program directorship opened up in 2007. And if I didn't open up, there was no way I would have gotten that job. But it was because of all the work that I was doing in fixing the resident experience in the emergency department, and then becoming more active in other efforts in the residency training program, selection committee, board preparation curriculum, all sorts of stuff that I was asked to take on. Again, that was without protected time, but I loved doing it. In fact, I created a whole new curriculum for trainees at Children's National conference lecture series in the emergency department. And I actually ended up giving half of them myself, because I couldn't get anyone else to give them. And so the residents, for some reason, started liking me. And so so when I was asked to take over the entire residency program, I was three and a half years out of fellowship. I had come from another institution. I'd only been at Children's National 3.5 years. But what I did in those 3.5 years was superbly important, right? I poured my heart into education, and I was lucky, right? I was actually great. No, I was more than lucky. I was given great advice to do the Master Teacher Leadership Development Program, and this is what Liz had already talked about earlier. Liz is one of my classmates in that program. It was a very innovative idea back in 2002 when it was created, and we did it, I think, in 2004, 2005, if I recall correctly. I think it was 04, 05. Liz, is that right? Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we were cohort 3, right?
Right.
So it was created in
Yep.
2002. But it was a collaborative effort between Children's National and the George Washington University School of Human Resource Development and the School of Education, really to give us master's level coursework in not only medical education, but on sort of leadership development, which, you know, I gotta say, the stuff I learned there has really served me well in the years since then, right? It has opened so many doors to me, right? Because most of the people who have taken on educational leadership positions here at Children's National have gone through that program. It's now, you know, over 20 years old. I think we're in cohort 21 now, and over 100 of our faculty members have been trained in the Master Teacher Leadership Development Program. But I got to say, I was given great advice again by Jim Chamberlain, my then division chief, that I needed to do this, and I was given opposite advice by some other mentors of mine, but I went ahead and I did that, and I learned a ton. But I think it's opened many doors for me here at Children's National. So I took over the residency program in 2007. I took over a program that was failing. Many of you don't know the history of sort of what was happening at the time, but the residents that year were telling applicants, don't come here. Nobody cares about you. It was a horribly low time in our residency training program. And I knew when I took it on, I thought I had a skill set to fix it, but more importantly, I actually knew I would be able to fix it because I love the residents. I love fixing things. And I knew that my career would be set based upon all the kudos I would get by fixing the residency training program. And so, you know, in a few years' time, I turned the program around. It became a very sought after program. And for 13 years, I got to say, it was the best job I ever had running our pediatric residency training program. I still miss it, you know, and I've been doing the vice chair DIO job now for over 3 years. I still miss being the residency program director because just like many of you are fellowship program directors, you get, you know, the connections you make with your trainees and how they become, you know, some of your closest friends while you're a coach to them, while you're a mentor to them. That is fabulous, and I love that. And I miss that. It's hard for me to do that now because I oversee I oversee 41 GME programs. Right, we have 1,600 trainees that come through our doors every year for parts of the rotational experiences or people, So I oversee a lot more, and I just don't have those personal connections. I'm still a pediatric emergency medicine practicing physician. I still do 25% of my time in the ED, so I still get to know the fellows well. Because I get to work with them, but I just don't get to know the trainees as well as I used to. Regardless, so follow your passions, and if that's education, right, make sure you show people why you need to get protected time for it. Pour your heart into it, and then hopefully something serendipitously will open up for you, and people will recognize, the work that you're doing, and the work that you're doing. Make sure you get scholarship out of it, right? And so, all the stuff that I'm passionate about, things that I want to fix, right, have led to the projects that have led to, presentations at national meetings, workshops, you name it, publications, whatever, because those are the things that I wanted to fix, right? Those are the things I wanted to work on. And those things, as you know, don't come with free protected time. That's your academic time that you put in on top of the other work efforts. And so I think, Celine, you asked me, how do you keep that going, right? With your protected time? It's hard. Those are the things I did, on those, early mornings when my kids were still in bed. My kids like to wake up late. I don't know why, they've all their whole life, which is nice. And so I would wake up early on Saturday morning and work for 3 hours, right, and get that paper written or whatever. But I will state that as I've progressed along, I'm not the first author in these papers anymore. I don't have the time. I like to mentor people, and so I've moved to the middle senior author sort of position on a lot of the stuff I'm on recently. But those are things I'm passionate about, right? So I want to train people better, and I want to make the future pediatricians, pediatric specialists better, and that's the education I'm looking at, and so and that's what I'm doing. So I don't know if that helps answer. I'm more than happy to talk more about any of these things. I think you told us we're supposed to only have a few minutes. I probably went well over that, even though I speak really fast. So happy to stay on and be a panelist.
Yeah, Dewesh, thank you. I think when we look at the sort of topics and questions that will come up, you've already laid the groundwork, whether you knew it or not. And I thank you for all sharing your journeys. I even personally felt a lot of parallels. Like my first job out of fellowship was the rotation director, and I had to fix the evaluations and the curriculum and the academic half days and procedure experience. And so, you end up feeling a kinship, even though folks in education work at different institutions than you. And I think that collaborating and learning from each other ends up being incredibly important. you all alluded to it a little bit, especially you, Celine, but do you need to get an advanced degree, like a master's in med ed, to do these educational roles? And what if your institution doesn't have that readily available? How do you advise that folks go about it? I'll throw this up to all of you, and then the next questions I'll kind of field out individually.
I think for me, it's less about the degree and more about the training, which often will come with a degree, but not necessarily. I think Devesh and I had that very similar path in the beginning, and then have kind of branched, him with residency and me with fellowship. But we both were sort of tasked with fixing a program, a problem, a something. And it's sort of like, how do you even start that? And so by taking classes, it was a way of, okay, well, we're going to write a curriculum in this class. It's like, I have a curriculum. It's called a PEM fellowship curriculum. And so, because we don't have one, and oops, we need one because the ACGME just put us on probation because we don't have one. So, I mean, it's just using that as potentially an example. So, so I do think the training is great to do that. I think to be exposed to these ideas and tenets that we didn't get in medical school. I mean, some people may have trained in teaching before medical school. I did not. So I think that getting that training in coaching, in mentorship, and feedback, and all of these different things, I think were just lifelong skills along the way. Yes, that could be in a master's, that could be in a one-year certificate program, that could be taking some sort of Harvard Macy course. There are many different ways of doing it. So I do think there's a benefit to some sort of education in that. I think it will just strengthen you along the way.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And Kim asked a very salient question. Did you get benefit from the network effect of these classes and degrees?
Yeah.
I see nods all around. Yeah, on
yeah,
a personal
absolutely.
level.
Absolutely. I mean, and so the master teacher program circle was just, at DC, for instance, was just this amazing group of people that, I left DC after 4 years and came back here to Rhode Island. But I mean, in looking back in sort of leadership in DC, it's all the master teachers cohorts that have now moved up together, and I'm sure that they continue to do that. I did have the benefit of taking a Harvard Macy course a couple of years ago that I think was just unbelievable. I mean, just absolutely life-changing, and sort of thinking about things from different angles. These classes, though, are money, and I think that you need to advocate for yourself and talk to your division director and department director about that return on investment that Devesh spoke about, I need to take this class and I'm not using my vacation time to take it. I am taking this class on top of my vacation time. I could use my CME time, but I'm not going to do it in my free time. I want the protected time to do this. And because I take this class, this is what I will fix for you. This will be my deliverable in a couple of years. And I think you have to be very, very good at that. The master teacher class was amazing in that it came with protected time as part of it. So if you have, and more hospitals and programs do have these sort of faculty development certificates and things like that. So searching them out, I think would be great.
I think you can go to Cincinnati and get theirs.
Yeah,
take
exactly.
it online.
You can, and notice that I did not advertise.
Not say that, right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful training program, and curriculum development was my favorite course. My final project in curriculum development was a podcast curriculum in pediatric emergency medicine. Right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Done. Right.
Yeah.
And so, so you're not doing these things in a vacuum anymore. They're actually, there's a reason for doing that. And some cost money, some are not. There's an AAP medical scholars program. There's one through ASAP as well that I'm totally blanking on. There are lots of these out there, and some do cost money, and some don't. So, I mean, I think, thank you, Celine, for that. So thank you,
EMSC has
everyone.
one.
The smart people, right? The smart people that remember these things, they all have abbreviations. But I mean, have amazing mentorship programs with them, and you will get those formalized training and get those mentorship circles that we've all kind of alluded to that are so incredibly important. I mean, the mentorship circles, I think, are equally as important as the content.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, and all these excellent examples pop in, and you know, one of my goals will be to continue to share these with, you know, the section as they come up, so that our fellows and junior faculty can take advantage of them. Dewesh, you mentioned your time as the rotation director, which I believe you said was 3 decades ago now. And that was my first foray into medical education as faculty after I'd been a chief resident. Are there other roles that you think can be valuable for junior faculty and fellows to consider as they dip their toes in educational leadership?
Oh yeah, lots of roles. But again, you need to, I think, take on a role that you see you wanting to do and that you're going to derive benefit from, and you're passionate about it, right? You don't just take on roles because A, you're told to do them, or B, because you think you need to do them to move forward, right? And so that is a path for failure, right? And so, you know, there's so many different things you could do from the entire spectrum of medical education, from undergraduate, you know, medical student education, you know, graduate, resident, fellow education, and on up, right? And so from the medical school, if your institution is connected to a medical school, there's medical students who come through, you know, you could help run the clerkship, you could co-run the clerkship, you could actually be a mentor, an advisor, or a researcher for a student, right? And so you could do summer research projects with them. You could go to the medical school and teach some classes, right, in the first and second year in pediatrics, right? They're always looking for people to shadow, right? And so so at the medical student level, there's tons of stuff, right? At the resident level, certainly in your ED, you can be the co-clerkship director. You could help create some curriculum. You could create some new advancement in assessment, right? Of techniques or you know, simulation, or be the simulation person, or be the person who leads the conferences, certainly. And then at the fellowship level, even more opportunities, right? And so you could bite off, you know, you could be part of an SOC, right? You could be part, and so you know, but do something that you're going to derive benefit from, right? And that you're going to want to do, and that you're passionate about, right? So if your passion is clinical research, right? Well, then it would be great to find medical students, residents, and fellows to work with you on research projects, because A, it's free effort, right? And then you're mentoring them and you're getting published with that work, right? So if your forte is clinical research, great. If you really love simulation, well, figure out a way of doing, you know, in the medical school, add in some pediatric simulation and go to the medical student leaders and say, hey, listen, I've got this great idea. You know, you don't do a lot of simulation in pediatrics. You know, why don't we do this? And here's how where we can build into the curriculum, or let's see how we can build this into the curriculum, right? And so find what you're passionate about and then merge that with holes that are necessary in whatever way you interact with trainees in the educational curriculum and continuum.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that helpful?
Absolutely. I think it's looking for those different roles and opportunities. They may have different names at different institutions, but especially, and Liz, you mentioned, med school loves to have passionate educators, and they're often hungry for them, right? Because there may be a high turnover, or they just need folks that are interested and invested. And I think all of these roles come with a commitment in both effort and time, and you have to show deliverables and give your leadership a sense of what you're trying to accomplish. This question is for you, Celine. So how do you negotiate that protected time? Right. And I've heard this come up more and more from my residents, you know, in my associate program director role, like, hey, how do I get protected time? I'm like, you're an intern, hold on. Right. But yeah, thinking about this, what is your advice on how to really account for your effort and cordon off time for the work that you're putting in?
Yeah, well, I think some of it's been touched on, which I think all of us, you know, in the beginning did it for free. You know, first you have to show that you have the skills necessary to deliver, and your department has to believe that you will translate your passion into a deliverable. And that's really hard to do if you haven't demonstrated that to somebody. You know, whether that's program outcomes, whether that's, you know, curriculum implementation evaluation, whether that's scholarly product. So in the beginning, personally, I still do think that you have to be okay doing a little bit for free. As you mentioned, that is changing in today's landscapes, where I do have a number of learners who graduate in first year out, say, I want X number of hours, I want this title, which part of me is like, this is amazing. I love the self-advocacy, but it's really hard to get leadership buy-in when you haven't, demonstrated first. And the other thing, which I think everyone alluded to, is really showing your time. So one of the things that I've recommended, which was actually recommended to me, but I don't know if anybody's heard Jenny Beck Esme speak. She's an EM physician who does a lot of work with Fem and EM, and she had recommended the Timular app, and it's an app where you can track your hours and how you allocate your academic hours. It's a little cube that sits, a virtual cube that sits on your desktop. You can also do it in more standard hours tracking mode. So you can actually log what you spend doing mentorship, administrative meetings, reading and writing, scholarly output. And you have a nice sort of log of that after a given amount of time, and being able to track, not just the outcomes, but your investments, and demonstrate that to leadership. And then, I do think there has to be some demonstration that you're helping to bring, yes, it's Timular, just like April wrote, some understanding that, and again, maybe you guys, there are others in the audience who can also speak to this. It's hard because education is expensive. The sources of revenue for any given department are really, patient care, philanthropy, GME funding through CMS, and grants, and an hour to 2 hours of protected time, depending on where you are and what your specialty is, comes out to something like $25,000 to $30,000 for the department to protect 2 hours, of a faculty's time. That's a significant investment. And I think showing that you're going to deliver something and making an effort to bring in, even if it's small grant funding, or even if it's bringing it in, through prestige, that you're going to return on that investment is important. We all believe in what we do, but it is an investment on the end of departments too. It's an investment in us as faculty members.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. I think I'll pivot off that a little bit, Liz. I'll throw this question in your direction. In terms of like documenting your work on both a personal level, what's your advice in terms of for reappointment, for promotion, those sorts of things? How should, and obviously it's different from institution to institution, but what's your advice on how we should document our activities?
It's such a great question, because I'm sort of knee deep in this right now, going up for professor under the clinician educator track, and it's perhaps one of the most painful things I've ever done in my life. So it is incredibly important, I think, even as a beginning faculty member, to look at what are at your own institution the requirements for promotion. And so start it at the beginning. Don't wait 6 years and then be like, oh my God, what lectures did I give 6 years ago? And, start going back through your calendar. And however you need to track it, I've never seen Timular, but that sounds amazing. What I do is every time I give a lecture or a conference, as soon as I am done, I open up my Word document and put it on my CV. And it'll take 30 seconds to do it. And in fact, as soon as this is done, it will go on my CV. But to create a table or a spreadsheet or a folder or whatever it might be is incredibly important to do that. I think the other thing is to make sure that you're collecting evaluations, because when you do go up for promotion and appointment, that is incredibly important, that they want to show a documentation of your teaching excellence. And so if you have a residency conference and they hand out evaluations, that's amazing, but sometimes they don't. And so I have created a little, kind of app thing that people can sort of go on, it's not Pull Everywhere, but it's a similar thing to that, where people can just sort of feed it in. And it actually goes to my administrator, so I don't see it, because I want people to know that I'm not seeing it. It's going in an aggregate form. I think that all of these things are incredibly important if you do them real time. If you train at a place that has education value units, that's wonderful. Very few places actually have those kind of things. So, but do it real time, or set it, do it once a month or whatever you might be. Someone gave me that advice sort of during fellowship, and I've continued doing it, and I think it's been great for that. It's So, and making sure also as you're mentoring people, keep track of those as well. One of the biggest things now going up for professor is demonstrating that I have mentored people. So I went back and wrote down every fellow that I've trained for the last 16 years, um, and where they are now. And it was sort of fun to kind of Google them and look at all the cool things they're doing. But looking at your CV very much on an ongoing basis, I think will save you oodles of time in the future.
Yeah, and you should be proud of those accomplishments, right? Those fellows were not on
Yeah.
autopilot. You played
Right.
an important role in their professional development, right? And
Yeah.
so it's fair to document it, no matter how
Yeah.
many lines of text it takes.
Right.
Could I jump
Exactly.
in also?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of your institutions are going to have an educator portfolio that you're going to be required to create and turn in when you go up for advancement, especially if you're looking to be promoted at sort of in an educator track, if your institution has that, or as an educator, right, a clinician educator or academic educator. And so take a look at what your institution wants in that, right, early on, right, years before you're going to go up for promotion. Look to see what sort of things, right, that mentorship grid that Liz just mentioned, that's part of our educator grid that we have to put in there. And we have to show not only who you mentored, but what's the proof of, academic productivity from that mentorship. Not only that they are doing great things now, but when you were mentoring them, what did you mentor them on, and what became of that? Was it a presentation? Was it a publication? Was it advancement? What was it? And so you have to document that all on a grid. So those are the things you need to be keep tracking of, just keep track of, as Liz said, in real time, whether that's an electronic portfolio or a folder in your computer, whether that was 20 years ago when I first started, literally a manila folder that I would keep stuff printed out in my backpack, so that I would know every 6 months. And the habit was drilled down by my former Penn Fellowship Program director, the rest of soul, Michael Shannon. When I first met with him as a first-year fellow, he actually told me, hey, every 6 months, I want you to update your CV and present it to me with our semi-annual meetings. I looked at him and I said, Michael, my CV is not going to change much in 6 months, right? I was a fellow, first-year fellow at the time. But that habit that I got into is superbly important to me as I became faculty, right? To do that, because it does change, right? And you forget things, a year out. And so I have an electronic folder now on my computer that I keep. It says, to add to CV, and every few months I'll add that to my CV. I don't do it as good as Liz does, where I do that daily after every lecture. But certainly every few months I go back and I add those things. But I have a separate thing that I keep for my electronic portfolio. And thank goodness I'm done. Hopefully I won't have to do this again unless I switch institutions. But certainly I kept track of all my evaluations. I tried to keep in contact with my mentees and see where they were. Once a year I'd shoot them an email and say, hey, what are you up to? So just to maintain contact with your former mentees is super helpful and fun, right? Because these are people you mentored and you want to see them do great things, right, later in life. And so, but look to see what your institution wants and what they value and what they want in the educator portfolio. I did that early on, and it served me well here at Children's National.
Yeah, and certainly if there's domains on the RPT committees that you feel are under-addressed, it's okay to go to the committee. Digital scholarship, for instance, right? There's not a particular area at our institution for, blogs and podcasts. And so, making sure that you find ways to document your activities, even if they're novel or they're different in your field from what has previously been accepted, I think is important. I believe Liz has volunteered to help us keep all of our CVs up to date. So thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to throw this question to all three of you. And I think it's become more and more important as we've recognized the many roles that you've all been asked to take. But the notion of, the gender tax or the minority tax, right? Often being asked if you are underrepresented in medicine to lead a DEI committee through the med school and through the hospital on top of your other leadership roles, or women in medicine that are being tasked to take additional roles on top of what they're already doing. What are your views on this? How do you maintain your academic, your professional productivity when you're being asked increasingly to take additional roles by the institution?
So, I mean, for me, I think that if it's something that you're passionate about, it is part of what you want to do. So, I mean, I am passionate about mentoring young women physicians in PEM. So I don't look at it as a burden, but I make sure that it is part of my job and that I'm being recognized for it and that I'm getting rewarded for it, wherever that reward might be, whether that's protected time, whether that's title, whether that's academic productivity, that I'm not just doing it sort of as a side hustle, that it actually is part of my main gig. So I don't think it should be something above and beyond. I think it's okay though to say, are you asking me to do this because I'm a woman, or are you asking me to do this because you know that I have interest in this? And the answer may be both, and that's okay. So but I think that that's incredibly important. So I mean, I've spoken to friends about that, and they've said, am I being asked about this because I'm the only minority in the group at the table, or is it because I have an interest in this? Then the answer may be both. So I don't know. I think that as women in pediatrics, we aren't a minority as much anymore, which is awesome. So I think, but I still think people struggle with different challenges for that. I think the other thing is that you shouldn't cave. I mean, I think that one of the things young women physicians struggle with is, I can't go to a 7 a.m. meeting or a 5 p.m. meeting because I have childcare issues. Well, that's not a woman problem. That's a young parent problem. And so I think being able to advocate for all people, I think is very important. It's one of my soapboxes. It's one of my ice cream campaigns. So.
Yeah, I can't obviously speak from the perspective of somebody who is underrepresented in medicine. And I know that we do have, I see names on the Zoom of other educational leaders who are URIM, and I don't know if anyone feels comfortable in speaking up, but I can speak from, I guess, a leadership perspective on also providing, protected time and space and title for those efforts. So if a faculty member, for example, in our department, we have 2 diversity ambassadors who are given that title and given dedicated time in order to serve on DEI committees and be the sort of DEI committee to selection, that representation to uphold best practices in diversity and equity in recruitment, to have a lens and a perspective and expertise on clinical health equity outcomes. I think growing programs, working with the Office of Diversity Affairs institutionally, growing your own educational programs, in health equity and assigning leaders to that and recognizing that time and effort, I think is also critically important and comes from departmental and institutional support. And then I think, being an ally to take the work burden off while giving the platform and the recognition and the voice to somebody who can speak from a perspective of expertise, both personal expertise and content expertise, if that's not the expertise you have. So, while I come from a feminist or, women in medicine perspective, that has led me into different collaboratives on structural competency and equity lens. And I'm not an expert in critical race theory, but I've used that as a way to partner with people who are experts in this and who, have identities and backgrounds different from mine, and say, I will, take on some of the work of leading this collaborative or writing this paper or building this up, similar to the way other mentors have, set up the overhead volley for me to be able to say, let me take a little bit of time off your plate because you're doing this in so many realms, and I want to be able to support that effort.
Thank you.
I mean, I think Celine and Liz have stated it very well, in that, you need to have protected time to do this work if this is what you want to do, but then you have to be passionate about this work, and hopefully it will lead to scholarship, right? If you're doing a great job, it'll lead to improvements. But what do you do when you're asked to do something and you don't want to do it, right? It's not where your passions are aligned, where you see yourself going, or where you're not getting protected time for it, And so I have a little advice on that, because I have been asked over the years, especially when I was junior faculty, to do numerous things in the emergency department that I actually said no to over the years, and to senior institutional leadership. And how did I do it? Well, I would, always thank people for asking me to do a job and say that I assume you're asking me to do this because you think I'm qualified to do this, or because I have a skill set to do this. Thank you. But I would do it as no as an affirmation of yes. And so some of you might have actually heard this. Has anybody here heard the no as an affirmation of yes, sort of way of turning down an opportunity, which is not really an opportunity if you're looking at it through your lens of what you want to do. So the way it goes is this, here's what I did. I would say, thank you for thinking of this. Thank you for thinking I'm qualified. I know I can do this right, but here's why I can't do this. No, because I'm working on A, B, and C, which I think are going to be better for you if I focus on those efforts, right? And so if I wanted to, was doing stuff that was, helping the division chief in the emergency department or helping the chair department of pediatrics, I would focus by telling them, here's where my efforts are, and here's why I need to focus on this, because here's what's better for you. So it's no as an affirmation of yes for things that you're already doing or that you want to be doing, and why that's better for the person who's asking you, that you're actually working on those things, not what they're asking you to do. So no as an affirmation of yes. Try that, it's worked for me. And has anybody heard that before? No?
You've just trademarked it.
So I don't think it comes from, I didn't make that one up. I think I got this from someone.
And I think sometimes people are asking you because you're a senior level person. And so this is the perfect time to mentor somebody and to say, listen, I think that this person would be great in this position, and I am happy to mentor them in that position. And so this is where sort of that chain of mentorship comes in. And I can meet with them once every couple of months to make sure that they're doing okay, but I can't go to the meeting every week because of this. And so, and it's a way to raise up junior people into these more senior level positions. And I think that that I think is just as, if not more important.
Yeah. And so I will then transition into our last question, Liz. I think that was a good segue. Yeah. It's all about succession planning.
Yeah.
Right. Because now we are nearing the close of our panel portion of the talk, and we will pass on the baton to Adrian Smallwood. But I'm wondering, what's the right time to hold an educational administration or leadership position? And then, when or how do you approach succession planning? Right. I don't think you can be the program director or the DIO forever, even if the job is wonderful. So what's your advice there to all of the group?
I mean, I do think that you should always have a succession plan at least 3 years before you actually are really going to be ready to give it up. So I just hired an APD knowing that I have about 3 more years in me. And with, sort of a 3-year plan of, she's junior, I'm senior. The second year we're equal. The third year she's senior, I'm junior, and then we're out, and then I'm out. So, I mean, I think that is good. So first of all, having that I think is really important, and having that discussion with your educational or whoever the leadership is, your division director or something, to say, listen, I can only do this for so long before I need to go. I think that the question always is if you do have protected time built into the job that you have, what are you going to do next? And so I think that that's something I know I personally am struggling with. So I have been very lucky in that I get some protected time as being fellowship director, and I don't necessarily want to go back to 1.0 FTE full clinical job. So also kind of looking at what I'm going to do next. Am I going to go part-time? What am I going to take over? Do I move like Division to a DIO role? Do I become our vice chair of education? There's, sort of thinking about those next steps for yourself as well, and sort of having that succession plan on the opposite end too. So where are you going to start with things is important.
And Dewesh, you mentioned in the comment that Celine is the exit strategy.
Strategy is ill-advised. No.
No, I mean, I don't have a great answer to your question. I think you got to always think about sort of, where, one of the things that one of the concepts that we were taught, Liz and I were taught in a master teacher program, is sort of this, horizon, your 5-year horizon, your 10-year horizon. And most of us don't think beyond the 1 or 2-year horizon, right? When we're creating our goals for our life or are creating goals for our academic work. It's hard for us to get to the 5-year or especially the 10-year horizon. But the 5-year horizons are sort of where you got to be thinking, okay, what where do I want to be in 5 years? And what do I want to be doing in 5 years? And is that more clinical? Is it less clinical? Is it more administrative? Is it more research? Is it more mentoring, coaching? What is it? And I think that's hard for all of us to do, right? And that's what we learned. But I think you got to think about that. And ultimately, you want the programs that you're running, your educational programs that you're running, to be successful. And I will tell you, as much as I missed the job of being the residency program director, I did it for 13 years. I know for a fact the current program director is doing a much better job than I would be doing right now, because after 13 years, I was set in my ways, right? I fixed what I wanted to fix. I fixed a ton of stuff. I was still fixing things, but she came in with a new vision, right? And really is revamping this program. And so, there is a lifespan into, what's good. And some people say it's 10 years in academic medicine. After 10 years, there are certain institutions, right, that say after every 10 years, the division chief has to change. It's just written in the way it works. And in some institutions, the division chief, like at Children's National, our NICU director, has been here 35 years. Maybe that's why we're the #1 NICU in the country. I got to say that. Children's National 6 years in a row, U.S. News and World Report. But anyway, but who knows? And so after 13 years, it was time to give up the residency program to someone else. And luckily, I had a fabulous associate program director who had left the institution, and it was my way of recruiting her back to Children's National to open that door for her. So.
Yeah, and Celine mentioned a decade or so sounds right. It's amazing how quickly time evaporates away. I've been in Cincinnati for 18 years now, and it flies by. And so really having a system, a thought with your mentorship team about what you're going to do now, what you're going to do next, what goals you have to get there, and how you'll measure those is incredibly important. You all three have been so generous with your time. We really appreciate it. I think we could have you serve on a panel for like 2 more hours, but then that would get awkward for everybody. Certainly, I appreciate your, sage and wise wisdom. Do you have any final words, any brief words of advice before we move on to the final portion of our day? We'll start with Celine in the lower left in our Hollywood Squares block here.
No, you started by, introducing us as wise and experienced, and I don't know if I can take on any of those adjectives, but I do see that on the Zoom, there are so many colleagues who are both of those things and have, their own leadership roles. And, I purposefully spoke through, a lens of survivorship rather than a lens of serendipity, but I don't want to discount the role of that either. There is sort of the idea that a spot opens up and you're in the right place at the right time. But I do think that, thinking about how you train yourself, the courses you take, the skills you take, the network you build, how you're mentored and set up for success, and then how you pass those on to people are all sort of the takeaways that I've heard, from the group and from the chat. And I hope that the other, leaders who are on the Zoom as well, feel those sentiments. And it's just an honor to be in this community and the amazing company of everybody here. So thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
I think advocate for yourself. And I think that this is something that I struggled with early in my training. Is I'd be like, okay, I'll do that because I'm just happy to be here. And I think that over the course of the years, I have learned that what I'm doing is important, and you are fulfilling a need for everybody. And so by doing this, education is just as important in the mission of a hospital as research. And in fact, I would argue in PEM, potentially even more important, because we have to train people to be good PEM docs and take care of those kids with RSV. So I think that making sure that you really can advocate for yourself, and if you can't or feel like you can't, find yourself a coach who will do it for you. And Cyrano de Bergerac it. So.
With the earpiece, yeah.
Yes, exactly. On Zoom, you can just talk while you're on mute.
Dewish, I will give you the last word.
Thank you. I also found it interesting, as Celine said, that you said we were wise. I don't think I have the answers, and I certainly don't have the right answers all the time. But you know, another mantra of mine that I'd like to share is, you know, just like the medicine we practice should be evidence-based, right, for our patients we care for our trainees, we really should be practicing evidence-based education, right? And so we should make sure that how we're teaching makes sense, right? And then what we're teaching, in the way we're teaching it, is the best way for them to learn to become better practitioners, right? So we should be studying and assessing that. And so that is what I have found a lot of passion in myself doing, is as I was fixing stuff or as I was doing stuff, to assess it, to write it up, and to really advance the science of education. And that is, you know, sort of part of what I built my career on. And so if that's what you find interesting, evidence-based education, I think there's a lot of work there, right, that we need to be doing, and it's right for innovation, and then sharing what we're doing to others. And so think of that as you want to connect sort of the work you're doing in education with your academic promotion.
Yeah, thank you. There might even be a session on December 9th in publishing your education research through the section on emergency medicine. I know, internal plugs, we have to do it. Thank you all for your time. You're amazing, Liz, Celine, Devesh. I'm certain that people can connect with you. Liz, we're going to seek your CV editing advice to come. So you've opened up the floodgates. I'm going to now switch over to the final portion of our day, where we have Adrienne Smallwood, who is a PEM fellow from Baylor, Texas Children's Hospital. And at the other end, she's going to talk about her initial journey and how she's gone through master's training and taken some leadership roles. So allow me a moment to unpin our panelists. You are depinned, and then I'll move Adrienne up to the stage and we can get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me at this meeting. I was actually very honored to be asked to talk to you guys about what educational leadership can look like as a trainee. As Brad mentioned, I'm a third-year fellow at Texas Children's, finishing up my fellowship, and very interested in medical education. Let me do this. So in true MEDED form, I'll start with a few learning objectives. So the first one is really just to talk about what educational leadership can be done as a trainee. And then number two, to really talk about the important factors that I considered when deciding to do a master's in medical education as a fellow. So I'll start by talking a little bit about my professional identity and how that came to be. So I first got interested in teaching actually as a medical student. I was lucky enough to be chosen to be one of the co-directors for a mentorship program for high school students in West Philadelphia who were interested in becoming doctors one day. So this was a program I was very excited to be a part of, to give back to the community of West Philadelphia. In this program, I had the privilege of working with another co-director who actually started her career out as a teacher. She started with Teach for America and worked for several years as a public school teacher. And so when we were tasked with running this program, we realized there were a lot of things that needed to be worked on and refurbished. And she had the ideas about lesson plans, because that's all she did as a teacher. And so I got to learn from her about like actually sitting down and thinking about what you want to teach for the program and how to structure lectures and how to break things down, and also how to teach to younger students, high school students. And during the leadership of this program, I realized I got really excited about learning about each student and how they learned best and what things they found difficult, how to motivate 14, 15-year-olds about learning about things like anatomy and biology. And that's when I first really began to see myself as someone who is an educator and as a teacher. The next stage of my career in residency training, I had the honor of participating in the medical education certificate program, which was an awesome 2-year certificate program at Lurie Children's, which was run by Dr. Karen Mango, who's here on the call today. And so this was my first take at kind of what Dr. Agarwal mentioned as like evidence-based education. So I love that terminology because that's kind of what I started to learn in this program. I got to participate in small group teaching sessions and lecture series from educational leaders across our institution, and actually learn about what are learning objectives, how to design a survey, how to teach to a small group, how to teach to a large group. And that's when I said, I really like this stuff. And I think that's something that I wanted to learn about further and more formally. So I did talk with a lot of my mentors about what an actual master's in medical education looks like and what are the benefits. I saw lots of educational leaders who did not have one and seemed to be doing amazing with their careers. And so that was something I talked to a lot of mentors before even deciding to go through with this path. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that decision process. A lot of it stemmed from what skills I thought could be gained by getting this formal education. The first thing, which a lot of you guys as educational leaders probably have a lot of experience in, is actually knowing a lot about like educational theories. So learning about how adults learn and how different learning styles and how you can cater to those different forms of learning. And then learning about how to formally develop a curriculum or a workshop. And there's a lot more to it than just sitting down and jumping into making PowerPoints, and actually thinking about what you want to communicate and what you want your learners to take away. And then finally, how you can evaluate and assess what you've done. And so those were some of the main skills that I really wanted to get out of the master's program and why I pursued that formal training. The next was scholarship. So I love that several people mentioned how we should try to be scholarly about all the things that we're doing. And so I had a lot of fun learning about educational research, methodology, and then also academic writing and learning about how you can take something like a program that you're running and be scholarly about it and disseminate what you've done. And then one fun part of the master's program that I really enjoyed was actually learning about all the new innovative technology that educational leaders can use. So learning about lecture gamification with things like Poll Everywhere and Kahoot, and learning about Nearpod and how to do narrated and asynchronous sessions for learners to do on a virtual basis. And then something, as someone who's done my entire fellowship and medical education training during the pandemic, learning a lot about distance education and how you can be successful in getting your learning objectives to your learners, even in a virtual setting. So those are some of the main skills that I felt that I would gain additional training and experience with by doing formal training. And so the decision to pursue an MED came down to kind of 3 different buckets of considerations. And so that's time, cost, and then application. So as far as time, I talked to a lot of mentors and peer mentors who had just done their medical education training. And the biggest thing they came away with is figure out when you feel like you would have the time and energy to do this. And our 3rd year fellowship is very nice. And so I felt like I would probably never be less busy than I am right now. And so this was the time to go ahead and actually take formal coursework. Oops. Sorry, going back to that one. So in general, just to talk about for those that are considering a master's, a lot of the programs are virtual these days. You can do pretty much everything online. I took 2 classes each semester for 3 semesters a year. It took maybe, I would say, between 2 and 6 hours a week. One of my colleagues described it to me as like, just consider it like you have an extra shift a week. That's about the amount of time that you'll spend doing this coursework. And then most programs have some sort of a capstone project that you do at the end where you can think about some sort of educational problem or some project that you want to do and design entire curriculum or workshop or lecture series, and then evaluate what you've done and then present it in terms of a paper, but then also a presentation that you'll present at the end of the program. So that's what I'm finishing up on right now. The next consideration was cost. So for me, I decided that I was done paying for education because I already had a mountain of debt. And the cost for an MED, looking at different programs across the country, is generally around like $30,000 to $35,000 for a 2-year program that you can take up to 5 years to complete. So for me, a big consideration was, how do I reduce this cost? So a couple things was deciding to do an in-state program. I did consider some other programs across the country, including the ones in Cincinnati, and saw the cost benefit of doing one in Texas. And in addition, I was very lucky enough to get some support from the Department of Pediatrics here at Texas Children's with a scholarship that covered almost 60% of the total program costs. So my decision was like, I do not want to take out another single loan, educational loan in my life. And so I really wanted to figure out ways to do that. And I felt like it was possible. And that also factored into my decision about where I wanted to do fellowship training, because I knew that I wanted to do this during my fellowship. And then something that a lot of you guys have touched on today was actually the live application of what you're learning. So one thing that mentors told me was, if you're doing this master's program, figure out how you can make everything double count for you. So how can you use the skills that you're learning about in these courses in real time? And so what that looked like for me was anytime I had to do a lecture or workshop or something for fellowship, I paired that with the work that I was doing in a course. So in a course that we were learning about designing presentations, that's when I worked on a lecture for emergency medicine residents about pediatric rashes. And so I tried to use every course and everything that I did, use it as something tangible and practical that I could use. Other things is like several of my colleagues have used their fellowship projects as things that they came out of things that they've done as part of their medical education master's program. And then I had mentors who told me about how they pursued an MED later in their faculty career. As they fell into educational leadership roles, they used the MED to help with their roles and the things that they were doing with that position. And then also like writing up a manuscript. One of our courses was all about program evaluation and assessment. And so if you're running a program or a curriculum, using the coursework to help write that manuscript is also a way to make things double count for you. And so being a trainee, there are a lot of ways you can get involved in educational leadership. And they kind of fell in 4 different buckets for me. The first one was mentorship. So that's something I've been very passionate about, even as a college student and medical student, always wanting to give back and reach out to people who wanted to be where I was in the future. And so one thing that came from that was the leadership of a program that I founded with 4 other pediatric trainee colleagues at the very beginning of the pandemic. Program called the Next Gen Pediatricians Program. And this kind of came out of what we recognized to be a great need for mentorship and guidance for particularly underrepresented minority medical students in their transition to residency. And that need was definitely exacerbated by the pandemic. And so what started as kind of a grassroots word of mouth program with, hey, let's just hop on a Zoom call and talk to some medical students, blossomed into what's now a 3-year program where we mentor over 100 students from across the country from underrepresented backgrounds about how to apply to residency and how to successfully become our colleagues one day. And so that's a form of educational leadership that I've had a lot of fun with and started out of really just like a passion project. Along those lines, having individual mentees, I think is also very important to me. As someone who's very interested in trainees and helping them develop their careers, I realize now that today's match day, I applied to or matched into residency now 6 years ago. So having mentees actually keeps me close to that and helps me remember all the different nuances and challenges that those students face. The next bucket for me is just being an everyday teacher. So especially in fellowship, there are so many opportunities to teach trainees, whether it's medical students, residents, also your peers in your fellowship program. And so developing lectures and participating in workshops is something that I feel like will help continue to develop those skills that I need to be a leader in the future. I had the great opportunity also to get some sim instructor training with Dr. Lemke about a month ago or so. So simulation is something I've always really enjoyed participating in as a trainee. So I wanted to get some formal training in how do I facilitate a simulation session. And so that's another way that I feel like I've seen residents as well as fellows get involved in educational leadership and facilitation. And then I also had the opportunity to teach some medical students about point of care ultrasound. So as I was learning how to use the ultrasound machine in my first and second year of fellowship, I got to work with Dr. Alade, who I still see on the call, and learn about how to take my own skills and then teach them to other medical students who were just developing those skills. And it's definitely a different skill set when you're learning how to use an ultrasound machine yourself and then directing a learner in how to do and capture those images. And then lastly, bedside teaching is something that we all do every day. And I feel like is an essential portion of being an educational leader, just learning how to, in our busy ER environment with EDs full of RSV, how to still teach learners and how to make sure that they're gaining skills from working with you. Another thing important as a trainee is really collaboration. So I've had the opportunity to join a few committees and be involved in certain listservs, including things like COMCEP, APPD, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and of course the section of emergency medicine. And my goal with that was just to align myself and sit in the room with people who were doing what I wanted to do in the future, and learning from fellowship and residency program directors about what their jobs involve and the different challenges and things that they were facing. So I feel like as a trainee, just aligning yourself and collaborating with other experts is a key facet of what you can do to be a future leader in the education world. And then peer leadership has also been really important to me as well. I was honored to be selected as one of our chief fellows. And so I got to think about our fellowship curriculum and how we can optimize things for our better learning. So things like changing the format of how we do our board reviews in a way that fellows felt like they were taking more away from. And then thinking about different challenges in terms of our clinical schedules and backup and all those fun scheduling things as well, I feel like is a fun part of being a peer leader. So those were kind of the 4 areas that as a trainee, I felt like were very reasonable and accessible ways to be a leader. And so as far as main career goals, the next steps for me is mainly just continuing to gain expertise. So I feel like to be a great teacher, you got to have that clinical expertise that you can pass on to others. So continuing on as a faculty member will be great. And then also several of you guys mentioned like saying yes to opportunities to teach, probably not saying yes to everything and being a little bit selective, but saying yes to those opportunities to use your educational skills and get feedback on your teaching and your mentorship and your leadership. And then finally, the pursuit of future educational leadership roles. So I see myself in the future, hopefully being in some of you guys' shoes and putting all of the skills that I've gained over the past few years to use in leading others. So yeah, that's mainly what I had to talk to you guys about. I had my contact information, and like other people mentioned, try to always get evaluations about my teaching and advice. So I have a QR code if you guys are interested.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Adrian. Really appreciate it. I think, when you hear about one person's individual journey, it becomes much more tangible and tactile. You can actually see how the pieces fit together. I'll leave with one question. What is the most important thing that your mentors have done for you? What's some of the most important advice they've given you as you've gone through this initial part of your meta journey?
Ooh, good question. I think well, one was definitely like making things double count for you. So making sure that you're not doing just like idle work that doesn't really produce anything or have something tangible that comes out of it is definitely one. And then also I got the great advice that just try to be scholarly in everything you do, whatever project or lecture or curriculum you're getting involved in. One, keep track of it, but then also make sure that you're evaluating and doing things in a way that you can disseminate the work that you're doing.
Really have a thoughtful process as to, how you are putting out work, how you're documenting it. Obviously, Liz will help you with CV management because she's volunteered for everybody. And yeah, I commend you on really impressive work. And sort of, you kind of figure it out as you go along a little bit, right? But the opportunities just continue to unfold. And I'm sure folks would be more than happy to connect with you and kind of learn about your pathway. And we're interested to see where you take it next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I know you are all working very hard in the ED. Ultimately, from a personal standpoint, I thank you all for your attention here as we talk for about an hour and a half in the middle of an afternoon. Some of you may have shifts later today or tonight. And so I hope that you all stay healthy. Remember that, we do this for the kids and we love to teach. And certainly, I think this network of professionals, especially medical educators here, is one of my favorite things about my career in PEM. And I love connecting with and learning from all of you. So thank you so much for your time. For those of you that were only able to attend part of it and unable to attend, we will be very shortly sharing the video recording. More news on what we're going to do next to come in the near future. Thank you, everybody.